Every night, for more than 20 years, a lantern burned in the window of a small white house at the edge of town. Travelers who passed along that quiet country road often wondered why the light was always there. Some believed it was simply the habit of an old woman who lived alone. But the lantern wasn't there by accident. It was there because of a promise and a prayer that had not yet been answered. This story is inspired by the words of Jesus in Luke 18:1. Men ought always to pray, and not to faint. In a quiet town surrounded by fields and winding country roads stood a small white house. It was a simple home with a narrow porch, a small garden, and a single front window facing the dusty road. The house belonged to an elderly woman named Mrs. Wright. Every evening, as the sun slipped behind the hills and the sky turned soft shades of gold and purple, Mrs. Wright would take a small brass lantern from its hook beside the door. Carefully, she would light the flame and place the lantern in the front window where its warm glow could be seen from the road. Night after night, the lantern burned. Farmers returning late from their fields saw it shining in the distance. Travelers walking along the road noticed its gentle glow. Even the children of the village knew that the lantern in Mrs. Wright's window would always be there when evening came. But very few people knew the reason. Many years before, Mrs. Wright's son Daniel, who had once been a kind and thoughtful young man, worked hard. He helped neighbors whenever they needed it, and often sat beside his mother in the evenings reading the scriptures together. But as Daniel grew older, the world beyond the quiet town began to call to him. He dreamed of distant cities and opportunities that seemed far greater than the life he knew. One morning, he packed a bag and stood in the doorway of the little white house. "I want to see the world," he told his mother. Mrs. Wright did not try to stop him. Instead, she placed her hands gently on his shoulders and said, "Wherever you go, Daniel, remember that God is never far from you." Daniel promised he would write. And for a while, he did. Letters arrived from distant places. In them, he spoke of work, travel, and the exciting life he was building for himself. But as the months passed, the letters came less often. One day, they stopped completely. Months turned into years. Some people quietly assumed Daniel had settled somewhere far away. Others believed he would never return. But Mrs. Wright never lost hope. Each evening, just as the sun went down, she lit the lantern and placed it in the window. Then she knelt beside her chair and prayed. "Lord," she would whisper softly, "wherever my son may be tonight, please guide him safely home." Night after night, the same prayer rose to heaven. The seasons passed. Spring flowers bloomed and faded. Summer days grew hot and dusty. Autumn winds carried leaves across the road, and winter wrapped the town in quiet cold. Still, the lantern shone in the window. One evening, a neighbor came by to visit. As they sat together, the neighbor looked at the glowing lantern and asked gently, "Mrs. Wright, do you truly believe Daniel will return after all these years?" The old woman smiled softly and looked toward the window. "I do not know when," she said quietly, "but I know that God hears prayer." And so the lantern continued to shine. One cold night, many years later, a storm swept across the countryside. Wind rattled shutters, and rain poured down upon the empty roads. Most people stayed inside their homes while the storm passed through the village. But as always, Mrs. Wright lit the lantern and placed it in the window. Far down the muddy road, a weary traveler struggled through the wind and rain. His coat was worn, his boots heavy with mud, and his face carried the tired look of someone who had wandered for many years. He paused and looked down the dark road ahead. Then, through the storm, he noticed a small light in the distance. A lantern. It flickered gently in the darkness. Slowly, he began walking toward it. When he reached the small white house, he stood quietly before the glowing window. Rain ran from his hat as he stared at the lantern shining warmly inside. His voice trembled as he whispered softly into the night, "Mother, you left the light on." At that moment, the door opened. Mrs. Wright stood in the doorway, holding her shawl against the wind. For a moment, she simply looked at the tired travelers standing in the rain. Then her eyes filled with tears. "Daniel," she said. The years of waiting were over. The lantern in the window had never gone out. Through every season, through every storm, through every long year of silence, its gentle light continued to shine. Because faith does not stop praying when the answer seems delayed. And sometimes, the quiet light of prayer guides a wandering heart all the way home. As Jesus said in Luke 18:1, "Men ought always to pray and not to faint."